Hi, everyone. Welcome back to this week's live stream of the Social Change Career Podcast. We're on episode 7, season 15. We'll be talking with Sabine Bouwmeester about digital nomads and connecting for impact. I'm Craig Zelizer. I'm founder of PCN. Sorry. I'm based in Medellín, and Sabine is also based in Medellín, but we're in different places today. For people who have not joined our live stream before, this generally goes about an hour, and we deeply enjoy hearing from you, whether on LinkedIn or YouTube. So while you're watching, please, particularly in the comment section, let us know where you're watching from, a sentence or two about your background or a couple of bullet points and your questions as we try to weave them throughout. This is one of almost 200, actually we're over 200 episodes. So you can find all the episodes with innovative change makers talking about impact careers from around the world at PCN Global/listen or any major podcasting platform. 3 quick requests. Please follow Sabine and Digital Nomads for Good. Follow her on LinkedIn or Digital Nomads on Instagram or other channels. We'll talk about that. Please follow PCN and subscribe to our free newsletters. And then the number one thing you can do for any podcasting person, whether it's this podcast or another one, is share and rate it. So take 10 seconds, whatever platform you listen on, it helps grow our impact. So I will summarize Sabine's bio. Her career sits at the intersection of sport, social work, and long-term community development. Based in Medellín, she spent nearly a decade working alongside locally led organizations, supporting children, families, and communities affected by displacement and violence. She's currently Director of Operations at Digital Nomads for Good, which we'll talk about a lot through this episode, supporting daily operations and partnership that bridge international volunteers, donors, and locally led foundations. I think they have about 25 foundation partners, which we'll talk about. From 2019 to 2025, she served as the International Director at Children of Medellín Fundación Caminos, a community foundation working with over 500 children in neighborhoods shaped by displacement and violence. Her work has included international communication, fundraising, volunteer coordination, project design, and long-term community engagement. Earlier in her career, she worked as a sports and movement professional. Hopefully we'll talk some about what that meant. Group fitness instructor. We're not going to make anyone do fitness online today. And a sports broker, which we definitely have to understand what that means in Amsterdam. Using sport as a tool for inclusion, coaching, and youth engagement. She holds a bachelor's degree in cultural and social development from Amsterdam University of Applied Sciences with a minor in international social development. She's done research previously in Medellín during her studies, which helped lead to creation of a football project for IDPs, internally displaced people, that still continues today. So, and I have a almost 15-year-old who's a super competitive football player. So anything related with football, I love, and done a lot of work with sports for development. So Sabine, thank you so much for taking time to chat with us today. And to start off with, when you think about,
for having me.
Thank you. So to start off with, when you think back to your earlier years, I mean, I'm much older than you were, but let's say when you were a teenager, were you always engaged in sports, or so where did you find this kind of path between sports and development or social impact? And did you aspire to be a professional footballer, a coach, or kind of what were your earlier career visions?
Well, so my family is quite sportive, mostly in running. But yeah, basically all my life I've done sports. And then bit by bit, when I was like finishing high school and I needed to choose what I was going to study, I didn't really know what to do at first, and then later I thought like it could be fun to study sports. Also because I liked practicing sports, not on a high level. Like I'm not really high level any sports, but I just enjoyed practicing the various sports and using sports as a tool. That came much later because I think it took me a long time to like develop that thought of that I could do something more meaningful. So I was living in a small bubble. So more by the end of my studies, when I almost finished my sports studies, is when I thought like, oh, maybe sports can be used for something bigger than than sports, for something bigger than improving your body and yourself. It can also be used to more some social changes. So yeah.
And are you a football fan, and do you have a favorite team, or is running more your preferred sport?
Well, I like to practice running. So I've been like last year I ran 2 marathons. So that's quite some time commitment. Football, I like football. I think it's but what I like mostly about football or about team sports is how the society like gets together. Like when it's the World Cup, like it's Dutch people get together, Colombian people get together, like people get together to watch games, and there's so much emotion. So that's what I like, but I don't really have a preferred team. Um, like I would say in the Netherlands, it would be Ajax because that's the biggest team and the city that I grew up in. And I would say Medellin, maybe it's a bit more national, but I don't really care too much about it.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, my preferred team in Medellin, we have three professional teams, or four, depending how you count, is Envigado. And I mean, I enjoy the sport, but I'm not a fanatic
Mhm.
for any team. And I am sad that Envigado got relegated this year. So they were, in the A League, and they just got relegated to the B League. But they're
Yeah.
very good at producing young footballers. So to go back a little bit, I lived in Europe many years, and so I've been to Holland or Netherlands multiple times, but did you have an affinity for languages? Where did your interest in Latin America come from? And during your studies, how did you decide to come to Medellin versus anywhere else in the world?
So languages, I was never really good at languages. In high school, they taught us 4 languages like Dutch, English, French, and German. And well, Dutch, I'm not particularly good at Dutch, and then English, um, yeah, was like okay, but like French and German was like horrific. So as soon as I could drop those subjects, I dropped them. So I was never really good at languages, um, but it was more by traveling. So I started to volunteer abroad. I worked as much as I could to go abroad to volunteer, and when you volunteer, you have to speak other languages. So my first volunteering was in Kenya. So that's where I spoke a lot of English. Their English is very different from the US or UK English, but it helped me a lot. And then I decided that it would be interesting to go to Latin America, and I was like curious about learning another language. So then I did some volunteer work in Guatemala, and I stayed there for 3 months. And the first month was about learning the language, and the other 2 months I volunteered more at the organization. So that's basically how I got involved with Latin America and got to learn my first Spanish words, because before going to Guatemala, I couldn't even count to 10 in Spanish. Like it was like non-existent. And yeah, when I studied social work, I had the opportunity to go abroad, and I was like, okay, if I'm going to do it in Latin America, then I can improve my Spanish. Or if I'm going to do it somewhere else, then I will just lose my Spanish, because I was like, it was like an all or nothing. And so I looked in Latin America, and I saw this project in Medellin from Fundación Caminos, Children of Medellin. And their biggest project is football. And with football, they try to change lives from children, from youth. And so it's like that was the perfect combination between the sports world and the social world, the social work that I was in. So I had the opportunity to come to Medellin, and I fell in love with the city like on day one, and learned Spanish. I learned a lot of Spanish when I was here for 10 months doing my thesis.
And can you share a little bit for people who may not know what you found? Because obviously Medellin is starting to become famous for many positive things, not just the negative things, but
Mhm.
just, and obviously in terms of digital nomadism, we're probably in the top 5 in the world, or somewhere between top 3 and 7. Not Bali or Chiang Mai levels, but very high. But when you came to Medellin, what did you expect? Because I'll say, like, I've been living in Medellin for 8 years, but coming to Colombia for 25. And my first trip to Colombia, I've lived in lots of places and been to places that are dangerous. And my first trip in 2001, I was like, they're going to kidnap me off the plane, like just stupid stuff. So when you came to Medellin, like, what image did you have and what made you fall in love with the city?
You thought they were not going to kidnap you, but you came anyway? That's cool. No, when I came to Medellin the first time, I had the experience of going to Guatemala and to Guatemala City, and I knew that Guatemala and Guatemala City was known to be a bit more dangerous as Medellin at the time. I never, like, in the Netherlands, there was a lot of like noticias, news about Colombia, but it was a lot about Tanja Nijmeijer. Like, there's a Dutch woman who was part of the guerrilla movement FARC. So she was a bit more in the news. But besides that, it never occurred to me how dangerous Medellin really was. So when I got here, it was 2014 when I first got here, and I knew there was like some things had happened in Colombia, and I did some research, and I knew that the inequality was very big, but I wasn't really scared, or I didn't really think much about it. I was just very relaxed going here, and I was just like, I'm just gonna experience this, and I'm just gonna be here for a couple months, and then I'll go back. So yeah, I was very, very open about it, and I was looking forward to see, because before, when I looked where I was gonna do my thesis, I was like, okay, I'm gonna be working for free. I'm gonna, like, it's basically volunteering. I was like, I want to go to the place where they need volunteers the most. And I was like, I wanted to go to the poorest country, because I was like, that's where they're gonna need it the most. And I was like, but Colombia isn't the poorest country. So I found this foundation, but I was like, oh no, I want to do it in another country. I want to do it somewhere else. And every time I couldn't find a project that really suited me. And I found, like, every time I found this organization in Medellin again, and I looked a bit more into Medellin, and I saw the inequality, and I was like, okay, this is a good place to go. But I never really thought about the dangers for me when I was applying to do my thesis in Medellin at the foundation.
Okay. And I'll just say, like, my first trip to Medellin wasn't until 2017, but and obviously it's funny because I'm pretty well educated, and even though I studied the world, my impressions of a lot of places was still limited, and so I'm kind of showing my ignorance. Hopefully I'm a little bit more knowledgeable, but I lived in Europe for many years, learned Hungarian, and it's like I didn't realize until I moved to Hungary that actually Transylvania was a real place. So I'm saying, like, that's some of my limited knowledge at that point. Can you talk a little bit about, so 2 things here. So one is, what did you do at Fundación Caminos? How did you make it meaningful? And then at a broader level, when you're thinking about volunteering, let's talk about both the host organization and as a potential volunteer. Like, what do you encourage people to think about if they're looking to recruit a volunteer, whether it's from their home community or outside, or if you're looking to volunteer, like, because I'll just say, I was a professor at Georgetown for 10 years, I've done lots of different things, and part of what and I've helped lots of people secure volunteering opportunities, and sometimes it can be wonderful, but other times there can be a mismatch between, to take a volunteer and make it meaningful takes time and effort and resources. And sometimes there's just not a good match. So just a little bit about, like, what did you do? How did you make it meaningful that led you to staying on for many years? And then your reflections about how to find and recruit volunteers.
Yeah. So between me being in Medellin at the foundation in 2014, 2015, when I stayed here for 10 months. So first I did one research, which was, I was supposed to only stay 3 months. I did a research about the impact of sports on vulnerable children. Um, so so that was for 3 months. And then one of my roommates, she brought me to a neighborhood called Nikitau. That's not the official name of the neighborhood, but that's how it's known. It's a place in the center of Medellín, and it is the place where a lot of the indigenous people live. It's the place where there's a lot of drug addicts. It's a place where there's a lot of prostitution. So when I was there, I asked the founder of the foundation, I said, like, hey, why aren't we having any project in this community? Because they really need it. There is so much poverty. They can really benefit from this. And so so I asked him, and he was like, well, if you want to, you can write something on paper. And I was like, well, I can like try to squeeze my brain a lot and to think about something, or I can do actually my thesis about it. So I asked the university, and they were like, yeah, of course you can do your thesis in Medellin. And at the foundation, they were also happy to have me investigate a bit more. So I investigated in that neighborhood if it was beneficial to have a football project in that neighborhood. So I stayed there for another 7 months for my thesis. So when I was staying here, so I had my projects, like I helped the foundation, but I was also doing my research, and then I left with the paper. So it was that's what I did when I just came to Medellin. I went back to the Netherlands, worked a bit, traveled a lot, and then I came back to work at the foundation. And at the work of at the foundation, I started like being like to guide volunteers, to teach English, and and fundraising. Those were my three principal, like most important tasks that I had at the foundation. And yeah, and there, so we had a lot of volunteers at the foundation, and there is always a lot of people that want to come and they want to help. And some of the volunteers, they are like, okay, I want to do this, this, and this. And those for me are the easiest volunteers. And some volunteers, they come and they're like, oh, I want to play with children. And then it's like, well, that's a bit more difficult. So I think for a volunteer, it's best to know, like, okay, what is my strength? What is what I like to do? And what can I provide to a charity? How can I help? I think it's very important for volunteers to first reflect on that, and for the organizations, and like it's very important that they know that having a volunteer is not to save time on anything. Especially depends on if a volunteer stays for a few months or a couple of weeks, like you're not really saving any time. If a volunteer is going to stay for a year, yeah, then it's really saving time in the long run. But the first weeks, months, you really need to help the volunteer get involved with everything, explain everything, especially international volunteers, because they don't know the culture, they don't know how to get to places. They need a lot of guidance, and it's interesting, it's fun to guide somebody, because like you see the city again, like through their eyes, and it's fun to explain to them like how things work here. And it's also every time that I'm explaining something, I'm also very aware, like, oh, I've really learned a lot about the city, because I can explain so much the difference between the different cultures and how things work. So yeah, I think it's very important for foundations to know it's not saving time, and it's important to do to manage expectations. I feel like sometimes there are some foundations that are like they're happy to receive volunteers, but they don't really tell the volunteers what their added value is. So then they have these volunteers standing there, and then the volunteers are a bit like, okay, what are we going to do? And I think it's very important that as an organization to be clear, like, okay, so your added value is social inclusion, talk to the people. It's not really about giving food or about, but it's just your presence is important, or that they know, no, your added value is that they can practice their English. So don't try to practice too much your Spanish. Try to have them practice their English. Like it. But I think like for a lot of foundations, that is very difficult to manage expectations of volunteers, especially international volunteers, if it's all Colombian organizations that don't know really where the people are coming from who are volunteering.
So one question, which might be a little bit challenging, and then kind of a ethical question, but there is a lot of research that shows that volunteering, again, whether it's in your home community. I'm trying to think. My grandmother is not alive anymore, and she was never going to retire, but she did retire. But she did like volunteer work, and there is a lot of research. The right kind of volunteer work, particularly in one's community, you build social connections, you build the social fabric, but it's actually, it could be beneficial both for the receiver and the volunteer. So if someone says to you, some people critique volunteering, and we'll get into the ethics of that, but anything you draw on about like from your own experience or research to show benefits of volunteering, whether for the person, the organization, or the host community?
Well, yeah, so my first volunteer experience, which was like in the early 2000s, I know that the volunteer work I did, it was in an orphanage in Kenya. And looking back at it, I'm like, it was not an added value for those children. It was a big added value for me, for my life, everything that I experienced. But I was very young, taking care of children with other volunteers, and the locals were not that present. So we were the primary caregivers of those children, but we would leave after a couple months. So I'm like, yes, there is definitely a lot of bad things about volunteering, that I think it's very important that every organization like is aware of what can we do to make sure that the volunteers that are coming, that it's actually an added value for our population, for the kids, for the community. I think that's very important. So what I think it's so when you volunteer and when you are not the person who is in charge, and you're not like a primary caregiver, you're there to teach English, for example, or you're there to give an extra hand with certain activities, I think that's always an added value. But if you are there to be the primary caregiver, if kids get very attached to you, like that should be a warning sign about like, okay, is this a safe environment for the kids? Because I'm gonna be here for a couple months, then I'm gonna leave. Like that's not safe, because these kids, they already have a lot of problems. They are not at the foundation for nothing. So they have experienced a lot. So having volunteers coming in and out of their life can be damaging, especially depending on the role that they're playing. If it's like an extra teacher, if it's like that's something different as somebody who's like actually like one of the more like caregivers for the children.
So welcome Lubna from Morocco, who does Sports for Development, and everybody else. Feel free, Lubna shared some on LinkedIn about her work, but feel free to share more in your questions, comments, and also whether you're on LinkedIn or YouTube, let us know where you're watching from. So a bigger ethical question is volunteering, particularly when it's not in your home community, particularly when there's power dynamics and resource dynamics involved. And I'll share some of my own stories, but is it a good thing that someone from another country, I'm generalizing, but that someone expends resources and time and money to, help another community or organization, and all the power that's involved, and also like the safeguarding that you're talking about and the long-term impact?
So I don't think that there's like a yes or no answer to this. I think like the benefits of volunteering is it can be very big for the community, for the children, and also for the volunteer. I think you learn a lot while volunteering. But yeah, I think it's very important to safeguard like what are your limits, and And I think it's important that the foundation isn't depending on volunteers. I think it's very important for a foundation to have professionals in place that actually do the day-to-day work and have the day-to-day responsibilities. And volunteers are more an extra. And I think that
Okay.
there is a big added value is like the cultural exchange that you are giving them. A lot of these kids, I always say like everybody lives in a bubble, but
Mhm.
everybody's bubble is very different. But some bubbles of like digital nomads are more like high class bubbles. And
Mhm.
also these children, they live in small bubbles of their community, and they have no idea about the world.
Mhm.
So as somebody from another country, it widens their world. It gives them more perspective. They learn a bit more about different cultures. They also learn like, oh, I can. If somebody speaks Spanish that isn't that good in Spanish, then maybe I can also try to speak a bit more English. Like it's not that bad that my English isn't perfect because that person's Spanish isn't perfect. So I
Mhm.
think it does help, but I think it's also very good to be aware, like to not make your role much bigger as it is.
Okay. Yeah, thanks so much. I mean, and again, I would say there's critiques of all kinds. And
Mhm.
also, I mean,
Yeah.
I would say intercultural study abroad changed my life. So similar to you, I originally went to Hungary for a semester right after the end of the Cold War. And I decided to stay for the year, worked out with my university. And that extra time, that in-depth experience changed my life. And if I had just gone for one semester studying it probably would have been an interesting experience. But that longer term in-depth connections, building the connections with people, winding up setting my own NGO, learning the language, becoming aware of all my, not, I won't say aware, but my own biases, and, challenges and limitations in my own bubble. So there is something there. I don't know where this saying comes from, but often I realized this the first time I really spent, whatever, a year overseas, like how much other cultures perceived things differently and experienced things differently. And I was in my own bubble. And that's harder to do if you stay in your own bubble in your community or culture. And also just the process of learning another language. Definitely like the more, and I studied French for many years, and I love French, but I can't speak it. So it's like going through the immersion route for me is the way to learn languages, and realizing like the world is so different. But so a couple of things here. So digital nomads for good. So you did Fundación Caminos for multiple years,
Hmm.
and then can you share how digital nomads for good started? Where did it come from? And for people who may not know, and probably some of the people watching today or listening in the future might be digital nomads, like who is a digital nomad? When did it start? And is there any data, to show? Is there any reliable estimates of the number of, let's say, not just short term, like a friend of mine's like, oh, I might go to Colombia for a month to work. I mean, they have a job in the
Hmm.
US, or they might go to
Yeah.
Guatemala. But like, does a digital nomad have to be traveling for X amount of time to be considered one?
Um, so yeah, lots of questions. I'm I'm just digital nomads for good. So I started at Fundación Caminos. I worked there for 6 years. And one of the things that I always thought about is like how there's so many foundations doing amazing work, but they are all on their own islands and they don't have a lot of resources and they don't have so not a lot of money, not a lot of time. So for them to exchange their knowledge is very difficult because they lack like those resources. Um, so when I decided that my time at Fundación Caminos was like coming to an end, because at that time it was like I love the job. I think it's one of the best jobs ever. But I was also like, okay, it's time for a next step. And then I got the opportunity to work for Digital Nomads for Good, and I was like, well, that was actually, it's a place where I can have those foundations connect with each other, and that they can learn from each other's experience, and I can help them with their resources because like we're fundraising to give it to them, we're showing their impact, so people can donate easily through Digital Nomads for Good. Um, so I think like those were very important things for me. And then as like a digital nomad, So there are numbers. I don't know the numbers now, but I know like there are numbers, and those numbers are based on how many people apply for a digital nomad visa in Colombia. So those are not the real numbers, because there is a lot of people coming in at the tourist visa, and they stay for a couple months, and then they leave, but they have been working here online. So for me, a digital nomad, I don't know if there's like an official like uh, like description of a digital nomad. But for me, a digital nomad is somebody who is working online, can and is fully remote and can change their locations. For me, that's a digital nomad, somebody who is like who needs to be connected, like that. The digital part, and the nomad part is that he can work from anywhere in the world, where as long as there is good internet and a device, a computer, or maybe even a phone, or just however people work. Um, so yeah, so there are numbers, but those numbers do not reflect the real amount of numbers that are coming here to work online, because yeah, there are people who are staying here. Even you can stay here for a year. If you come in like the second half of a year, you can stay for 3 months. You can extend it for 3 months. You can go in and out of the country around New Year's, and then you can stay for another 180 days, and then you're almost a year like in Colombia. So it can be easy to stay here for a longer amount of time, and then you can apply for a digital nomad, and you can stay up like for many years. You can stay in Colombia. Yeah.
So welcome. We have people from Nigeria, Nepal, elsewhere. Please share your questions and comments and resources, and of course, a bit about your work. So we have Doyin Sola from Nigeria, who's runs a nonprofit providing economic empowerment, education, and rehoming after terrorism for women and girls. Someone else in Nepal working on forestry. So can you describe a little bit the origin of Digital Nomads for Good? And so when it started, did it have this focus on trying to support 20 to 25 community-led foundations or NGOs in Colombia? And what has it grown into?
So the founder is his name is Dominic. He lives in the UK, and he was living in Bogota, and he saw the inequality in Bogota, and he was like, oh, he wanted to do something. So he was like, oh, maybe I can volunteer. But the volunteer hours were impossible for him to keep doing his online work, and volunteer was impossible. So then he was like, okay, I can't volunteer for this organization. And then he was like, oh, maybe I can donate. And for a donation, they only had Bancolombia, and he only had his UK bank account. So it was very difficult for him to transfer the money from the UK to Colombia. It was almost like too expensive to give a donation. And that basically started the idea, and he started to investigate, okay, so there must be more people like me who are earning like a good amount of money, living very comfortably in Colombia, and maybe they want to help out the local foundations. Maybe they want to do something positive in the country that they're staying in, or in the city that they're staying in. So he started to do his research about like which part of Colombia, where are the most digital nomads, where is there a lot of foundations, and where is there a lot of inequality. And it's like, so Medellín is the city with most digital nomads, and that's actually the city that is most interesting to start digital nomads for good. So we started about 3 years ago, and 3 years ago the focus was really on fundraising, on getting money from digital nomads to the local foundations. Um, and yeah, it has been a lot of trial and error, and it has been quite difficult the first years. And when I told Dominic that I was gonna resign from the foundation that I worked for, he immediately jumped on that opportunity and was like, okay, I want to talk to you. And he asked me if I wanted to work for DNFG, for Digital Nomads for Good. And I thought, well, actually it fits really well with my vision. But from the first time that I spoke to Dominic, I always told him like, yeah, there should be more about like it's to volunteer and to give more knowledge to the foundations, like all these foundations together. if you give one workshop to all the foundations, like that's a huge added benefit for those foundations, because if all these foundations have to hire their own person to give a workshop, that's a lot of money. But with DNFG, I can hire somebody to give a workshop, and there is a lot of foundations profiting from that one workshop. So yeah, that's basically when I started working for DNFG. I started to focus more on the 3 pillars that we have today. So one is fundraising for the charities, and the other one is volunteering. So I organize a volunteer calendar, and I post it every single week on Instagram. So to make it easy for people to do low commitment volunteer opportunities at various foundations, and so that also people can connect easily and get out of their comfortable bubble, often in El Poblado or in Laureles, and go to visit those foundations. And the third one is knowledge. And knowledge, on one side, it's at the foundation side, giving those workshops. And on the other side, every Tuesday, I post on social media about like knowledge about things like estratos, that a lot of people that are staying here for a couple of months, they don't know what estratos are. And people from other countries also don't know what estratos are. It's like the social levels that the cities of Colombia has. So like level 1 is the poorer areas of the city, and level 6 is the higher, like the wealthier part. And the wealthier people have to pay a bit more taxes, and they have to pay more for their water, electricity, and gas. But yeah, so every Tuesday it's about something else, like displaced people. It's about inquilinatos. It's a lot of different themes that I'm like, it's important for people to be more aware of the city that they're living in. So I think it's important to have that knowledge part.
And if you think, I guess maybe the 4th year now, whatever year you're in, if you know, whether it's the annual report or just metrics, if someone says like, this is great, how do you try to tell the story of the impact? You know, what are some either data or stories you'd feel comfortable sharing? So is it X amount of money raised, workshops delivered, but does that lead to change or number of connections built?
I think the impact is mostly on the side of the foundations, and it's also like the impact that I've seen in the years that I worked at Fundación Caminos. So those are like the stories of. So there's a lot of stories, and I hear those stories. Yeah, I hear them a lot, but. So like a story of a girl who started to live in a shelter called Jardín de Amor. And she started to live there when she was 13 because she was sexually abused by her stepfather. And the mom and the family, they lived in a small town where there was no psychological help. So what they did was they brought the girl to the city, to Jardín de Amor, to be raised there, and there was like psychological help for her. So she grew up there in an internado. From Mondays to Fridays she would stay there, and the weekend she was with her family. And with the psychological help, like she was able to talk about her traumas and everything that happened. And then she got involved with Fundación Caminos, where she got the opportunity to study. And now she works full-time, like at foundations. And she is the happiest person that you'll ever see. Besides everything that she went through, like from the sexual like abuse to feeling like abandonment when she was placed at the shelter, and everything that happened to her. But like you meet her, and she's like the happiest person that you'll ever see. And if it wasn't for those foundations, she would be in a village. She would be very bad off. Like she wouldn't have studied. She wouldn't like be able to teach other children now what she's doing like every single day. So I'm like, there is so many stories of all those people, and I'm like, that's the real impact. With the NFG, we also, of course, like we measure like the amount of volunteers that we place with organizations, the donations that we get that we can give to the organizations, and the amount of beneficiaries that all these foundations combined have. So those are all the people that we are impacting on a day-to-day base, but I think like the real impact stories are those personal stories of those people that can really show like, okay, my life has changed because of the work of those foundations, of the things that they do every single day.
And can you talk a little bit across the foundations that are partners with Digital Nomads for Good? Are they mostly working on youth programming or environment? And, how are they included? And then if some of our listeners are in Medellin, do you take new ones? Like, if someone's like my foundation or this friend's organization that does amazing work, how does an organization get considered as a potential partner?
So the foundations that we work on at the moment, that we work with at the moment, most of them work with children, but we have also some foundations that work with homeless. We have a foundation that work with the indigenous people. We have youth programs that organize that youth that they can go to study after they finish high school. Even though there is free studies, it's often very difficult for people to enter those universities. And not only, and like with universities, it's also Alcena, which is more like learning to be like an electrician or a plumber or a hairdresser,
Yeah,
or like
it's more like a
practical.
technical school,
Yeah.
trades.
But it's still difficult often for them because transportation is expensive. If you are the poorest person in your classroom and you can't buy the basic stuff that you need to attend the classes, like that's difficult. So there is a lot of dropouts for those reasons. So when there's a foundation behind them that supports them financially with transportation or with those materials, but also psychologically helping them to talk to them, to be like, no, you can do this and this is your opportunity, and be there for them, and also have peers around them from other students who experience the same thing. So those things are very important. So yeah, it's very wide, the foundations that we work with. We have tried to also talk to some of the organizations that work with dogs and cats, and but those are a bit more difficult to get into our program because they seem to not really have time to talk to us. So like that's too bad, but maybe I'm sure at one point it is possible to include them also in Digital Nomads for Good. I do have them in the volunteer opportunities. So on Sundays you can walk dogs if you are a dog person. So for organizations to enter the NFG at the moment, for the volunteer calendar, it's easier. I visit the organization. I can put them in the volunteer calendar, and that's it. I visit every organization to be sure that the volunteer opportunity they offer, that it's safe, that it's real, that there is guidance, and that it's something positive added to the community. To be one of the organizations to get the donations, that's a bit more difficult also because it's still difficult for DNFG. We're just starting, so it's very difficult to get donations. So if we don't get donations, then it's difficult to also give it to other organizations. So it's still, the amounts are still so low. Like we're very happy with any donation we get. But we need to get a bit more donations to be able to open up for more organizations. But I'm very happy to get more, to hear about other foundations, and you can always send them to me and I will look at them. And the first step is to have it in the volunteer calendar, and then from there we can look at possibility to get you on the website.
And in terms of registration, someone does donate. Is it through the UK, through Colombia, through the Netherlands? In terms of, so if someone is donating, I mean, there's time, but resources. So does it go? You don't have to get into all the logistics, but is it? Some people donate. A lot of people donate because they want to, and other people they want to, but they want some tax benefit. So is that if someone is it donating in Europe, is it through UK, Netherlands, or somewhere else?
At the moment, it's still in the UK, but we're working on to also organize ourselves in the Netherlands. So it will be more beneficial for people from the European Union to donate, because then it can be deductible for taxes. And then the next step is to get registered in Colombia. But being registered in Colombia is a bit more expensive because then you need to hire people to do your financial part,
Yeah.
which is something good. But as a charity or a foundation startup, it is some extra costs that is quite high because it's not a one-off, like, okay, I pay this once and then it's done. No, it's
Right.
for the rest of the time that you exist. You need to make sure that there is professional people who are like, you need to have two financial people that will help you. So first we need to be sure that DNFG will continue their work, and as soon as we get organized, like, I do want this year to be the year that we're going to get organized also in Colombia, so that also foreigners who have companies here that want to help charities, or not only foreigners, also locals. If it's difficult for you to choose which foundation to donate to, if you donate to DNFG, you're supporting all the organizations with only one donation.
Mhm.
So we also try to make it easy for people.
Can you talk a little bit about the good and the bad of digital nomadism? So we've talked some about the good.
Mhm.
I mean, but there's
Yeah.
obviously, I don't want to generalize at all, because there's people, but some people are coming to Medellin or other places, for, let's say, not the intercultural, let's say,
Yeah.
cultural sharing to learn salsa or Spanish, but for drugs or prostitution, or a mix of things. And also,
Yeah.
gentrification is a huge issue in Medellin. And obviously, like, no one organization is going to solve it. But how do you think about that? If, is that part of why Digital Nomads for Good exists, to maybe not say counterbalance that, but to build more positive engagement?
Yeah, especially the founder was very, like, strong about that. He was like, there is so many bad news about digital nomads, especially I think maybe about a year ago, or like 6-7 months ago, that there was like a lot of child prostitution, and there were foreigners that were paying children for those services. Um, so um, so that was something that he was like, no, but it's important for foreigners to also show that we're not only in Medellin and doing all those bad things, because those bad things are more in the news. And we need to show that as digital nomads, as foreigners staying in Medellin, that we're actually also doing something good and that we're contributing to the city that we're living in. um, but yeah, like everything you said, like there is a lot of drugs, and there is a lot of prostitution, and there is gentrification, and yeah, it's definitely, to me, I feel so. I listened to another podcast, and I still need to reach out to this person, but they basically said, like, okay, there's locals complaining about that there is a lot of prostitution and drugs in Colombia, but they are offering it. It's like having a shop and selling something, and then complaining that people come in to buy. And I was like, well, that's not really how it works, because it's all demand and supply. So if there is a demand, that there will be a supply, especially in a country with so much inequality and so much poverty and people living day by day and so much trauma. So I'm like, of course, if there is a demand, there's gonna be people offering everything that somebody is asking to be aware. And yeah, there is like, and of course there is more locals going to prostitutes as there are digital nomads
Mhm.
going to prostitutes, or foreigners going to prostitutes also, because there just are more locals
Mhm.
as foreigners in the city. So like, of course that's going to be more, but I think it's very important to know, like we are the guests in this country.
Mhm.
And so like this it reminds me of something that happened years ago when I first got here. um, I went to the coast and I came back, and I was just talking about like how, with my roommates, I was talking about like how I represent, to them I represent the Netherlands. Like they don't know
Mhm.
anybody from the Netherlands, so for them whatever I do is typically Dutch. That's just how the Dutch are. So I was in Choco, and my shoes are wet, and I flew back to Medellin, and my shoes were on the side of my bag, and accidentally I transported crabs with me.
Mhm.
So, and then like the joke was like, oh yeah, that's just what Dutch people do. They transport crabs from the coast to Medellin because that's something that I did.
Mhm.
So I think it's very important for people to be aware. Like maybe you feel like, okay, but I'm just like, I'm staying here for a long time and I'm just one of so many foreigners. Yes, you are, but at the same time, you're also representing to some people all foreigners, and
Yeah.
you're representing maybe your country to a lot of Colombians or to a lot of locals that are staying here. So if you decide to do something that doesn't really represent you very well, that doesn't represent your country very well, like just be aware that when you are somewhere else, it's just that one story that somebody hears, that's the story about
Mhm.
a country, about the person. So I think that's something that is very important. And as a collective, I think that there's still more disadvantages as advantages for the locals, like with the gentrification and with everything that's happening. So I think
Yeah.
mostly therefore it's important to show that we can do together as a group, we can do more positive things.
Yeah, it's a very hard topic, and brings up policy questions and cultural and power and economics. And I didn't go, but Colombia just hosted Bad Bunny for 3 nights. And
Oh yes.
there's talk. And it was a big deal, but it brought in maybe $40 million in tourist money, which is a huge thing. But then also prices and inflation, and so it's interesting because there's a cultural institution here called Confama, Caja de Compensación, which is hard to explain. But it's like they interviewed me and a bunch of others maybe like 2 years ago talking about foreigners who live here a long time, like to show, just different experiences. And the government and the city government and the state government also does a lot on trying to prevent trafficking. And it's interesting because when you go, I mean, I have a friend who works on anti-trafficking more in Europe, but if you go into a hotel in the US, you generally don't see like no child prostitution or trafficking. But in
Mhm.
Colombia, I'd say particularly over the past few years, it's like we don't tolerate it. Period. Doesn't mean it doesn't
Yeah.
happen, but it's like there's a legal campaign and a cultural and just training staff.
Yeah.
So a question that came
Something
in.
that I wanted to add as well is that I do feel like the world is getting smaller. There is more digital nomads in Medellin, but there is also more digital nomads in any place in the world. So I'm like, this is also it's a global problem. Of course, like Medellin is like in the higher ranked cities of digital nomads. So of course, and it's a city with a lot of inequality. So you will see the bad of the digital nomads a bit more. But I do feel like it is everywhere, and I feel like that is something that I understand that some people get really annoyed by it, but I feel like it's also like a train that just continues. And if you're not on the train of gentrification, if you're not on the train or understanding that this is happening, then you won't benefit from it. But if you complain against it, it's I feel it's also a little bit sad for the people that are complaining a lot about it and trying to fight against it, because it's a movement. I don't think it's a movement that can be reversed. So I think it's important to try to find the positive and try to see how we can bend it to something more positive. So with something like digital nomads for good, but there can also be a lot of other like things that people can do to make it more a positive thing, as try to fight against it, because it's not going to go away. It's not that people are not going to, it's just going to be more and more people that will work wherever they want to. So it's going to be, yeah, it's going to grow.
Yeah, and I don't know the data on. I mean, there are some professors who study this digital nomadism globally, but I would assume 80% come from global north, but it's not 100%. And
Yeah.
the dream is that whether someone's work at home or digital nomad or both, that I mean, talent is universal, opportunity is not equally distributed. So a little bit of a positive side of digital nomadism or work from home is that people in other countries can access opportunities that might, so I don't want to oversell it, but it is happening to some degree. So a question that came in from Doyen Sala in Nigeria. I'd like to know how the organizations, this might go back to Fundación Caminos or some of the foundations you work with. I'd like to know how organizations handle dropouts if they do not have the capacity to handle things like transportation, mental health. So how do organizations navigate this in your experience? Because she says they do technical skills training for young women and they have about a 15% dropout rate, maybe because they can't fund transportation or provide the wraparound services. And not that you have a magic answer, but any insights, how to best provide this in resource constrained environments?
Yeah. No, so yes, there are dropouts. There are dropouts at any foundation, and sometimes it's very difficult to see those dropouts. So I've seen the foundation that I work, okay, part of the foundation, you have to go to school. And schools are for free, like primary school, secondary school is for free in Medellín. It's a public schools. So that's just the minimum to be part of an organization. But then of course, there is this boy who his mom, he's 13 years old, his mom gets pregnant, it's a high risk pregnancy, and he needs to help out at home a lot. So you try to be flexible, and that family gets already a little bit of more benefits from the organization. But yeah, at one point that boy drops out of school so he can help his mom with the pregnancy. And so we had the mom and the boy come into the organization and be like, well, you dropped out of school, you didn't inform us beforehand, but it's the rule is that you need to go to school to be part of the foundation. And then they looked if they could draw him back into school to stay part of the foundation, because that was something that was very important for them. And he couldn't go back that same school year, so he dropped out of the foundation for a couple months until the new school year, and then he could enter again with the new school year. So it is but yeah, and there are some kids who will drop out and they will not come back. But I think I think the focus should always be long term, and you can't help 100%. That's just impossible. But I do think if you are strict enough, of course, there are sometimes that you have to be flexible, but it's also the example you set for everybody in that community, because that foundation is now changing that you need to finish high school. That's something that a lot of the parents who were displaced by violence, they learned how to write their name and that's it. For a lot of the parents, because they grew up as farmers, they grew up very poor and they worked on the land until they were displaced by violence. So for them, school was never something that was important. And now they come here and there's a foundation that says, no, you have to finish high school. And what does the foundation win with kids finishing high school? It's nothing. It's just for the future of their children. So for parents, it starts to change, because that foundation has been in that community for a long time. So it starts to change the mentality of that neighborhood that kids need to finish high school. But to do that, you need to be strict for a longer time, and that's difficult. It is very difficult, because you see those kids, you connect with some kids, and it breaks your heart that sometimes you have to let a kid go. But it's something that you need to do for the greater good, to set as an example. And also you can keep your doors open for when that kid goes back to school, and make sure that you have a room for those persons, for those kids, for those youth to always come back. And I think that's important, but you can't prevent 100%. Something important is guidance, when you look at university, to make sure that they won't drop out, it's guidance. But there is not 100% score. Maybe the study that they choose is really not for them, and they just really don't want to finish it. Maybe there is circumstances at home that you can't control. But also then I think it's important to keep the door open at least a little bit, that as soon as they come back, that they can go to university and they can use the organization again to get the guidance that they need.
Thank you so much for the question and response. So we'll start to wrap up, go a couple more minutes, but one question with your training in social work, because the challenges that you have helped work on and continue to work on are often large challenges, whether you're doing direct services in the community or supporting other organizations doing that. So just your thoughts for anybody, not specific to Digital Nomads for Good, whether they're working in their home community or elsewhere, how do you deal with burnout? And anything you'd want to share, because there's some things that are not that difficult, but these are people's lives and communities and power and inequality and injustice, and there's more than enough money in the world not to solve our problems but to address them, but our system is just not doing a good job of allocating them. So any thoughts on, if you've burned out, how do you stay resilient? And for anyone who wants to work on challenging issues, your reflections of like the good and bad of like, how do you sustain this work?
So I think with burnouts and how to keep doing something positive even though you feel like you don't have a lot of energy, I would say like to low commitment volunteer activities is something important. So organizations that won't rely on you for, maybe if you're like, oh, I can teach English, but I am on the border of a burnout. Don't start to teach English. Like that's a higher commitment volunteer activity. But you can help with maybe a cleanup, a beach cleanup, a city cleanup. Like you can help with 2 hours of cleaning up the city. It's something that is very hands-on. You don't have to think too much about it. It's more physical work. It's actually, I did it last Saturday with a group of volunteers, and it's actually a fun activity. You talk to each other, you learn about the neighborhood, and it's interesting and very low commitment because you do it once and it already has like a great effect. We cleaned out an area that was like a playground for kids. So after that, like we had 8 bags of garbage that we collected, and it's already immediately there is like the benefit that kids came to play, and you would just see like, okay, now they are playing in a cleaner space. So I would focus on that, and also the smaller hands-on activities are also less frustrating because teaching English or other higher commitment activities, it's more difficult to see the results, and to see the results is it feels good and it gives energy. But with teaching English, you're not going to see much result after 1 class or 2 class or 3 classes. It needs months and months of classes to see some results, and it just takes a bit more time. Yeah, and the other question I forgot.
I think just any ways you personally have dealt with like sustaining your own work, where you've seen other
Yeah.
peers.
Yeah, so working in charity, hands-on jobs in smaller foundations, like the foundation can be big and can do a lot of work, but it's still one foundation in one location, is never gonna be paid with high wages. So I think like if somebody's interested to do this type of work, I'm like, just be prepared to not earn a lot of money. Like be prepared to earn what locals earn. So I at Fundación Caminos, I earned a very average Colombian salary, and that's like, and that's okay. I could live in Medellín, I could live off that money, and I just knew like I can't visit my family back home as often as I maybe want to. I can't go on vacation often, but I do live a very fulfilling life. So for me, that was, or that is way more important. And with DNFG, how DNFG is sustained with like 90% of all the donations go to the organizations and 10% goes to DNFG. So we can organize a workshop. We can, like, it's my salary to promote all the foundations and to promote the organizations, and to be able that foreigners can connect to the local charities that we support. So yeah, it is difficult to sustain. It's not easy, and I think it's important that somebody who is interested in that field of work, I say it's it changes your lives. You learn so much, and you get so much gratitude, and you feel like it's like, for me, it gives me so much. But I do think it's important for somebody to be aware, like, okay, it's not financially, it's not as rewarding. And I am very lucky that my family back home is supporting me. So if anything, if there is anything at all, I can always call my family back home and ask, like, this is going on, can you help out? But yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So the last three questions. So Digital Nomads for Good. There's another organization out of Bali that does some similar work. But are you getting requests? Because there's, as we talked about, Medellín's probably in the top 5 or 7 of digital nomad cities, and I'm aware of the one in Bali. Tariq, I forgot his last name, runs that. But are people coming to you who've been to Medellín and say, well, I'm going to Bali or I'm going to Buenos Aires, and like, do you see this potentially expanding, or for now it's mostly concentrated on Medellín?
The dream of Digital Nomads for Good is actually to expand. The idea is that in cities where there is a lot of foreigners living, where there is a lot of inequality, and there are foundations that are doing the day-to-day work, that would be cities that ideally DNFG, Digital Nomads for Good, would be in, to connect foreigners with the local charities. So like, that's definitely something that like in a couple of years, like the first step I think would be Bogota, and then maybe a next step could be Cartagena, and then maybe after Mexico City or Buenos Aires, or like the places where and also I would love to start that but no, first Medellín needs to run well, and then we have to see, like, how can we organize that. And it will probably start with a volunteer calendar, and from there to grow step by step, bit by bit.
And then can you talk a little bit about, as someone helping to run an organization, also working for a foundation, what skills do you find most useful on a daily basis? So obviously communication and relationship skills, but is marketing important, or fundraising, or editing videos, or like, what would you say is the top 3 or 4 skills that you rely on a regular basis that you're trying to strengthen, or you would encourage others, like, these are the skills that are more likely to be needed in this sector?
I think one of the skills most important is the skill to adapt to any organization or any environment. I think if you are interested to work abroad for a local foundation, to be curious, to be able to adapt, to try to understand what is the local context, and then be able to find the words to communicate what is going on to the potential donors or the people who are interested in the work that you're doing. So I think, like, the communication for me, like, newsletters is something that is an important tool to get people, to get them familiar with the job that you're doing, to get them to tell them the impact that you're making, like all these. I think that's very important. Yeah, but it depends really on the organization. It depends a lot. Like at Fundación Caminos, we are very lucky that we would receive a lot of visitors. So they would subscribe to the email, and then it was like, then sending out the email, it was more or less easy. I think it's very important to be creative, to start a campaign, and to start, like, because those campaigns, they can spread. So I organized a raffle, I organized a bingo, like these things. I think that's very important for people to, if you are interested in this type of work, you need to be able to at least fundraise your own wage, your own salary. I think that's very important. So at least that you're working at an organization needs to, at least that they would be able to pay for your salary. And then, of course, it would be good if you can get a bit more money so they can also pay other people or do the activities that they want to do.
And you did helped organize a great comedy night. I love comedy, so comedy. So last 2 questions. How how can people, if they're coming through Medellin, so go to the website or Instagram, and then if people aren't in Medellin and they are just interested, do you have swag? Like, could someone buy like a Digital Nomads for Good t-shirt? I mean, they can give donations, but is there other things they can do if they're not in Medellin?
So the t-shirts are all in Medellin. So we do sell t-shirts. It's also like in the Tesla. I don't think with the light you can see. Like,
yeah, it's a
I'm
little
wearing
hard to see. I can see the logo, but
it's a kindness circle, so it says
yeah.
the steps to for kindness. But yeah, all the t-shirts that we sell are in Medellin, so I'm gonna have some sent to the Netherlands, just with people who are traveling to the Netherlands, and they will bring a couple of them. So yeah, if you are from another country, like the easiest way to help is to share on social media the messages, like the posts that I'm writing, that I'm making. I think that's a big help to spread the awareness that I try to spread. And then the other thing is to donate. Absolutely, if you donate, like it's a lot of the local organizations that benefit a lot from every donation that we get.
And if someone is, whether they're from Medellin or inside Colombia outside, does Digital Nomads for Good actually yourself as an institution take volunteers, or you're more helping to place people in other institutions?
So far, it has
long-term volunteers.
Yeah, so far it has been easier to get volunteers for other organizations, but with DNFG we can definitely use volunteers. But like I said before, like it is also a time investment. At the moment, I'm the only person behind Digital Nomads for Good, so I need to make sure that if there is a volunteer, that it's a volunteer who has kind of can be independent, is hands-on, and has a little bit of knowledge of the things that the person wants to do. But like if there is a photographer, if there is like somebody who is good in making videos or all these things, like it would be really nice to get some more promotional materials to promote DNFG more, to promote the foundations more. That would be very welcome, because at this moment I'm like, the pictures that I publish are mostly taken by my phone, which isn't the best camera. So like those things are things that as a starting organization we are struggling with a bit, or I am struggling with a bit. So yeah, definitely very welcome. If anybody wants to volunteer, just send me a message, and I will definitely see what we can do.
Okay. And the last kind of quick question, where do you go, like for your own, let's say, it could be just pure entertainment, not related to professional work, but any movies you've seen, any books you're reading, newsletters you go to, podcasts, whether, that kind of you just enjoy, whether it's related to your work or just, let's say, growth?
Yeah, no, for me, it's very important to disconnect. And for me, the easiest way to disconnect is to go for a run. So, like I said in the beginning of the podcast, like that, I did 2 marathons last year. And so that's something that is like, for me, like when I'm running, I'm like, I don't get any messages on my watch. I'm like, I make sure that that's just when I'm running. My phone, I won't look at it at all. So that helps me a lot. And then I also have a dog, so I need to walk the dog a lot. It's a bigger dog that needs to exercise a bit. So when
Waffles is very cool.
Yeah, he has more friends as I have. Yeah, so with walking the dog, and I listen to podcasts when I walk him, so like that helps me a lot. And then I like to listen. I'm quite a fan of Trevor Noah, that I also think is interesting, because he's also between cultures and he's very good at explaining and very funny. So I like to listen to his podcast, or a podcast, The Math, with like the short stories. There's also a Dutch version of it. So those podcasts help me a lot. And yeah, that's what helps me. Yeah.
Okay. And then last question, just for people to stay informed on your work or Digital Nomads for Good. I mean, they're connected but separate. So LinkedIn, Instagram, website. So if people want to follow you and or DNFG, what are the best channels?
So DNFG is on Instagram, on Facebook, on TikTok, and on LinkedIn. I think the best channel to follow DNFG is on Instagram, but all the other channels work as well. So yeah, Instagram is easiest because that's the easiest place also to promote the volunteer calendar, but also it works well for us. And for me personally, I am also most active on Instagram. And then, yeah, Sabine Bouwmeester, like that's maybe a bit difficult. Okay. It's easier to find DNFG. The name on Instagram is DNFG Official. So that's a bit easier to find. And through DNFG Official, you can easily find me, my personal profile as well. So yeah, you can go there and shoot me a message and
yeah, we'll put all the resources, or as many as we can, in the show notes. So thank you so much for your time and wisdom and all you're doing to help connect global and local culture and institutions in a city that is amazing but faces so many challenges like everywhere in the world. And I've been to one or two events, they're great. And also just for anybody who happens to be in Medellín, we also have two great impact communities, many impact communities, but two. So we do impact meetups and dinners and lunches. So you can message me, or Manuela Guzman runs another group. So that's really interesting. And for people joining around the world, thank you for your questions and input. And again, as we started off in the beginning, please follow Sabine and Digital Nomads for Good on Instagram and or LinkedIn or other channels. Please consider rating the podcast. And we're halfway through season 15, so lots of amazing guests coming up. And that's it. Thank you so much, everybody. And I guess it's Tuesday, so have a wonderful Tuesday. It's hard to believe it's already 2026. Thank you again, Sabine.
No, thank you, Greg. And thank